start with the questions, I would like to run a quick poll to understand your opinion about the recent developments in the Chinese steel industry. So may I request my colleagues to show the poll, please? Ladies and gentlemen, you may click on the poll icon that you may find at the bottom part of your screens to reach the poll. Please select your answer and then click on the Save button to vote. The question is, do you think the production restriction policy in China will continue to exert a negative impact on steel demand during the remainder of the current year? Obviously, this is related to the energy crisis and the production restrictions which will be applied by the central government. The answers are A, yes, certainly; B, not at all; C, it will have zero impact. Once again, you may click on the poll icon that you may find at the bottom part of your screens to reach the poll. Then please select your answer and then click on the Save button to register your vote. Please pick your answers now. Let me repeat the poll question and answer choices once again. Do you think the production restriction policy in China will continue to exert a negative impact on steel demand during the remainder of the current year? A, yes, certainly; B, not at all; C, it will have zero impact. If you like, you can also refresh your pages. And I believe we may be ready. I would like to request my colleagues to end the poll now. And if we can show the results of the poll. Can we do that, please? Are we ready? Yes, we will be ready in about 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. Please bear with me while we are getting the results ready to be live. Can we show the results now? Yes. Let me try to read. Yes. So 67% of, no, 67% of our audience thinks the production restriction policy in China will certainly exert a negative impact on steel demand. 24% thinks there will not be an impact, and 8% says it will have zero impact. So thank you very much. Let's move on to our panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. Before we move on to the panel discussion, let me remind you that, as always, we will be running a live Q&A session after we finish answering the pre-collected questions. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. So let me remind you that you may send your questions directly to the panelists. And in order to send your questions, please do click on Who is Attending section at the bottom right-hand side of your screen while you are in the virtual conference room, obviously. And then click on the Exhibitors, and the conference room option will appear. Once you see the conference room option, you may type in and then send your questions. You may type in your questions here and then send your questions directly to the panelists. Now let us welcome the chairman of the IREPAS committees once again. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. Can we have the chairman of the IREPAS committees on the screen? Yeah, we are waiting for the chairman of IREPAS committees to appear on the screen and change with the slide. Yes, Mr. Setterdahl, Mr. Björkman, and Mr. Baysal. Thanks very much for your patience, gentlemen. We have already seen the poll result. As a matter of fact, we will have a few more questions to discuss the energy crisis and the Chinese steel industry. So I'm looking forward to listening to your opinion as well. Now, please allow me to go ahead with the questions we have collected prior to this session. First question will be directed to all of you, will be for the panel. Let me read the question right away. How would you judge the performance of the steel industry and long steel products trade within the context of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic? Is it satisfactory? Has there been a genuine recovery? With vaccinations limited largely to the wealthier nations and universal vaccination seemingly a long way off, allowing greater time for new and possibly deadlier virus variants to develop, would this not mean greater difficulties for the steel industry down the road? Who would like to start?
I can start.
Please go ahead,
Mr. Vice. Yes. Good morning, ladies, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Murat introduced, I am Doğan Baysal, president of Seba Metals Group, which is serving the U.S. steel industry for 40 years, worldwide 65 years, with 3 generations of Baysals. As for the panel question, I do agree that there's definitely a genuine recovery in the steel industry. During the pandemic, the demand in steel products, just like many other businesses, did get seriously affected. Construction industry did slow down with labor shortages and lockdowns, and automotive industry also had issues with the demand for less cars. However, I want to point out that steel production was not the main problem, as most mills are well automated, capable of working with minimum staff, but the production slowed down just for the adjustment to the demand. Going forward, if there's another pandemic, steel production may be fine, meeting the ongoing steel demand is what I think.
Thank you very much. Mr. Björkman?
I mean, we are, of course, seeing a rebound and a reopening, and the vaccines rolling out is not going to stop. It will continue. So we expect the general conditions to improve. Of course, we've also seen quite substantial support from governments to rebound out of this lockdown, and that's sort of buoyed markets and helped out. But we will continue to see openings and markets resume to more normal circumstances over the next year, and bottlenecks will be built out. So yeah, we expect the markets to continue to be able to perform well.
Thank you. And Mr. Setterdahl, what would you think?
It's a great time to be in the steel business. And we started out 1 year ago with low volumes and low margins, and today we have most steel producers are producing at their rated capacity or above, and the margins have never been better. So there's no summary that is less than that. And I view the situation going forward for the first quarter of next year to be also excellent. The Chinese situation, as long as they don't start to increase their exports, whether they import or don't import more is not so relevant for the rest of the steel industry, because the steel consumption is growing at a higher rate in the rest of the world than it is in China. I think that's important to remember.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's really great to be in the steel business. I cannot agree more. So yeah, next question is for the raw material suppliers, Jens. Rising coking coal prices constitute another challenge the market has been facing lately, leading to a higher finished steel prices. Do you expect the coking coal supply shortage will be resolved shortly? What's your expectation regarding coking coal price trends in the near future? I know that's not your immediate expertise, but let's have your opinion.
Yeah, it's not this is not my trade, but of course, geopolitical circumstances for China has, of course, led to a pricing peak, and I mean, just from looking at statistical and how they have been communicating and issuing policy, it seems, of course, that during the first quarter of next year, the steel production will be capped at lower levels than during this year, some 30% lower, as I understand it, and that would, of course, mean the demand for the raw materials should be capped also. So one could expect, I think. Demand levels will be slightly lower during the first quarter of next year in China. And that doesn't mean that the material is not expected to be produced elsewhere, but at least that's the Chinese demand situation is our expectation.
When the coking coal prices start to fall, then we'll know the peak has been reached. I don't think anybody can forecast when it's going to continue peaking. Obviously, medium term and long term, everybody is working on technologies that will consume less coking coal. So obviously that will take less pressure off. But the production of metallurgical coal in the United States has decreased dramatically over the last 10 years. And that's one of the reasons why we have this shortage now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's move on to the next question. This is for the producers, Michael. ArcelorMittal has recently announced an input cost surcharge for its long products in Europe due to higher energy prices. Do you think other producers will follow suit?
Well, ArcelorMittal got their feet wet, and some other people decided to come out with some discussion about possible surcharges. We'll see what happens. As Alex mentioned in the first session, that the extra increases on producing steel estimated in Spain were about 120 euros per metric ton. And I believe that ArcelorMittal came out and wanted to have a surcharge of somewhere less than 100 British pounds or euros or something. I don't remember.
Yes.
Whether it has shown up on invoices, I don't know. Obviously, we'll meet with lots of pushback from the customers because they're already paying 1,150 euros for hot rolled coil. And if you put a surcharge of 100 euros on it, no matter where it goes out of the consumer's pocket. Mm. So we'll see how that plays out. Medium term, I believe that we're going to have CO2 tax surcharges. We're going to have surcharges on all products because right now steel has surcharges on ferroalloys. And a lot of contract businesses based on contract the prices like from crew or from Platts. But there has been very little reference to natural gas, electricity in the pricing of steel because we've had, 15 years of basically constant electricity prices. And the electricity prices have generated to be quite even worldwide because of the advent of windmill power and solar electricity, which is substantially cheaper than coal-fired electricity. So the jury's still out on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's continue with the subject of energy, and this one is for the traders. Electricity and gas prices have also been soaring in the EU, resulting in some plant shutdowns or production halts, as in the case of Sidenor in Spain, for example. Do you think this situation will support the EU's demand for imports?
Well, the demand for imports in Europe have been strong for some time now, with the domestic prices being considerably higher than the imports. The short answer is yes, there will be demand for imports, but the imports have other limitations. For example, specifically for rebar, quotas and homologations are the limiting factor in determining how much is imported, not the demand. We saw the Turkish quota commencing on October 1st get consumed in one day, with many importers still holding back significant volumes to clear customs waiting for January 1st. Also, significant imports from the other developing countries is not realistic, as it takes time to qualify due to homologation procedures, which can take in Europe up to 18 months.
Well, I would agree with that. Thank you very much.
I'd like
next
to add
one.
I think that we can expect that some of the other electric arc furnace producers in the middle of Europe and Southern Europe will announce 2-week shutdowns in December, because that used to be the way they acted when electricity prices were high, and now we're having high prices again. And we have already only the middle of October, so there's plenty of time to announce temporary shutdowns.
No, absolutely.
Or they can increase prices, or they can increase prices even more. There's no limit there, right?
That's speculative.
Sky's the limit.
Right.
Okay. So this next question is for the producers, Michael. The power shortages specifically experienced in China have resulted in production cuts, which in turn have created an opportunity for imports. Do you think this will be a long-term trend, and how will prices be affected in your opinion?
A lot of people thought that after the harvest holiday from the 1st of October to the 10th of October would open up with dramatic buying from China. At the same time, it was a wait-and-see period of about 1 week, waiting to find out what is going on. But the new prices quoted by the suppliers weren't very attractive to the Chinese buyers. So I think that the rush has not come yet. Maybe everyone is waiting for news what's happening on the Russian export tax of 15%, because they have the ability to move 50,000-ton parcels very quickly, as does Turkey. So I think the jury's still out on that as well. Wait and see.
Well, that's the name of the game, I suppose. Wait and see for many issues right now. Okay, thanks very much. Next question is for raw material suppliers. Since the end of September, we have seen import scrap prices in Turkey start to rise, with the upward movement picking up speed in the early part of October, accompanied by price rises for Turkish billet and finished long products. At the same time, prices worldwide have started to surge upwards also. How long do you foresee this new upward trend of prices lasting? What will be the main factors determining its duration and extent?
Yeah, I mean, yes. How long is a rope? It's of course a very difficult question to have an answer to, how long markets can continue. Yeah. But in general, if you look seasonality-wise, this is normally a fairly strong period in production when it comes to, I mean, October, November. That period is a period of strong production and fairly often also pricing, comparatively at least, maybe not the absolute price, but comparatively towards the rest of the season, it's a fairly strong period, which we're also seeing now. September is usually a fairly low point in the market, at least when you look at year on year. And so we are following that seasonality at the moment. We also have to remember that we are coming out of a period of 5 months, or at least 4 months negative trend. May, June, July, and August and September have all been in a negative trajectory, sort of, at least in the Turkish trade. So the buyers and the market has become used to a negative sort of softly negative trend, and once that then turns around, there seems to have been some stress in the situation in the market whereby the continuation of that negative trend is sort of discontinued, and then we get a spike in pricing. So yeah, it's difficult to say how long it will continue, if we've seen a trend shift or if we're just a bump in the road. But generally speaking, there seems to be continued strong production rates. There's still fairly balanced market conditions. Home markets are performing well. Europe and the United States are doing fairly well, and so yeah, generally speaking, the demand level seems to be fairly supportive of the market.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jens. Let's move to the next question. This one is for traders. What are the prospects for a positive outcome to the US-EU talks on resolving their steel trade dispute, which are due to reach their conclusion by November 1st? Is the US likely to switch to tariff rate quotas, as has been suggested in some reports? Or what would be the impact of a positive outcome on steel trade in the two regions, and what would be the knock-on effect elsewhere? What would you say?
Well, it's hard to speculate on such matters. I asked to my friend Willie Alf from Europe. He believes that there is a good chance that they will switch to quotas. However, if the quotas are based on certain period historical averages, like they did in Korea, Alf doesn't expect too much of an impact, as he believes the volumes on average were not excessive. Besides, the demand in EU is high, prices are high, so I don't expect substantial exports to the US anytime soon. Remember, it has to be melted and poured in EU to qualify for the exemption. For example, they cannot galvanize an Indian or Turkish hot rolled coil and ship to the US with zero duty. Same goes for billets.
I'd like to add something there that
please.
First of all, EU today means not United Kingdom, so their tonnages are left behind. And I've also heard that there may be an extension to this change from November 1 to December 1st. And if you look at a product that is very top price right now, hot rolled coil, in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and the American investigation will most likely be based on 3 years, the average hot rolled coil export tons per month was 49,000 tons, which is a relatively small quantity, and that was split amongst all the other countries in the EU except UK. So, and obviously there were some exports of rebars from Spain, Portugal, Italy, and maybe from Eastern Europe, but Turkey's not included in the EU, so there's not going to be any relief there. So I think that there will be a change in policy, and the change in policy will not really improve anything or negate anything.
Actually, judging from what Biden administration has been doing lately, nothing has changed. They're actually getting tougher on imports than they were before with the Trump administration. So things are not getting any better. I think they're getting worse or the same. But we'll see. Thank
you. Gentlemen, I might have missed one question about the energy issue. May I go back to ask this question to the panel about, once again, the surge in energy costs, if you don't mind? Are the recent surges in energy costs worldwide just a temporary phenomenon, or will they be more permanent? How do you think the overall situation will impact long steel production and trade worldwide in the foreseeable future? Which regions will be affected the most? My apologies for skipping this one.
Well, let me comment on that one. I think the modest energy price increase may be permanent, but the surge that we have today is definitely temporary. Remember, between 2008 and 2014, the energy prices were even higher than today, but later years went down and even collapsed during the pandemic in 2020. Because of that, many drillings were postponed, productions were halted, coal plants closed using the environmental pressure. Coincidentally, today, energy prices are up again. Going forward, all it takes for Russia or Saudi Arabia or United States to increase production, the prices will go back to normal levels again. This cycle always happens. Now, which regions will be affected the most? Obviously, the regions that are importing their energy will be affected the most.
Thank you. Michael, you were saying something, I believe.
Europe and the emerging markets will be affected the most because of the import nature of the business. Whether Nord Stream 2 is going to be open within 1 month or 6 months is an open question, probably will. However, I think that we are in for 6 months of high energy prices, and we'll have to get used to that. And how much they fall back into a normal level will depend upon consumption. Europe is using more electricity now than they were 10 years ago. And so the electricity production in Europe has not marginally increased. And as everyone knows, electricity has to be balanced. You can't produce it unless you use it. Mm-hmm. So we are waiting for increases in electricity from windmill power and from solar panels. But those are incremental increases and not the gigantic increases. And if you talk about nuclear power plants, we're talking about 5 to 10 years. So big question is, how are we going to increase electricity production in between from 1 year from now up until 10 years from now? That's the medium point.
Well,
the major winner, I think, is the LNG terminals out of the United States, right?
Yeah.
Going forward. Yeah. In the next few years, at least.
Yeah. And of course, the Americans aren't interested to export unless you have an export terminal, because more exports, the higher the price goes. It's like the scrap that Turkey is buying from the United States. Everyone in the United States complains and says that the scrap prices will be lower if the Turks stop buying. Well, okay, it's same thing with natural gas.
Well, in addition to this, I hear that there is a tendency in certain countries to go back and utilize their coal-fired power plants again, which I think if they go that direction, they'll take care of some of the energy shortage for temporarily, I hope.
And as for from a production standpoint, China obviously will be reducing the production, and there will be an opportunity for imports. So, Michael, would you think that would be a long-term trend as well, or what would be the impact on the prices? I mean, China's potential increase of imports.
No, well, if they import more, obviously there's more demand, and the more demand will create higher prices. But I think the jury is still out on whether China will start to import more. Many areas of the world, pig iron is considered to be toxic now because of its higher CO2 footprint on Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. So there may be a balance out. And in the Brazilian situation there, the Brazilian mills are well occupied, so they're consuming more of their own iron. So we will just see. The jury is out on that one as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Once again, my apologies for skipping that question on the energy. Let me go back to the US market. This one is for producers. Once again, have there been any adjustments in how global steel producers view the US steel market now that the volatility of the previous administration is over? In the US, long product mills are keeping rebar production rates low in order to produce more high-margin products like merchant bar. Are producers in other countries doing the same?
Our group of companies, we produce long products in the United States, United Kingdom, Czech Republic, and in Australia. And obviously, as a steel mill operator, everyone is obligated to earn as much money as possible. And nobody is restricting output. They're just adapting output to the market as to where the margins are best. Rebar prices have been lagging in the United States. I think everyone has seen that rebars are sold at lower prices than wire rod and also at much lower prices than merchant bar. So if you can produce all three products, obviously you shift production towards your best profit. There's no shortage of rebars in the United States, so I don't think anybody can complain about that. And the prices for rebars are actually quite low compared to hot rolled coils, almost half price. I mean, where is that happening elsewhere in the world? Nowhere. So rebars in the United States are a bargain compared to hot rolled coil in the United States.
Yes, hot rolled coil prices are crazy, aren't they?
But no. I don't think that U.S. mills are keeping rebar production low to sell merchants. Besides, most mills are not equipped to switch from rebar to merchant bars that easy. Maybe other countries can, I don't know. Rebar production in the U.S. is not low on purpose. We had problems in mill upgrade closures, like Cascade in California, which added to shortage in the rebar price, or actually demand in California. The problem is the surge in demand. Demand is higher than expected, and due to the stimulus plan that the U.S. government just introduced. So I don't think there is any shortage of rebar, on purpose.
Okay. Let's move on to one of the major issues in today's market, the freight rates. This one is for the panel, for all of you gentlemen. Higher shipping freight rates have significantly increased the costs of long-distance shipments and have also contributed to the greater regionalization of the global steel trade. Can we expect to see freight rates regress to close to what were previously considered normal levels? Have the factors which caused the higher freight costs, including shortages of containers and bottlenecks at ports, been sufficiently resolved, or are higher freight rates part of a longer-term new normal, not helped by increases in fuel costs? So, who wants to start? Yeah, go ahead.
I think the shipping high rates will definitely not the new normal. However, the shipping prices will not go down in the next few months either. Today, the rates are 200 to 500% higher than the 2019 levels. For example, container shipment from EU to US was $2,500. Now it is $5,000. Similarly, from Asia to Europe, used to be $2,500. Now it is $10,000 to $12,000. This definitely is not sustainable, as shipping companies will build new ships and container boxes. Ports can decide to work 24 hours like they did in LA. And finally, the surge in demand may soon normalize. Having said that, we are not going back to 2019 levels where the most shipping companies were hardly making any money. Naturally, they were not building any ships and containers, which I think will change going forward.
Okay. Would you agree, gentlemen? Michael, Jens?
Well, Jens, one of the cost of shipping scrap. I mean, what is the price of freight for scrap and percentage of the price of scrap?
It's quite big at the moment. So shipping material is very expensive when it comes to raw materials. And of course, pricing for freight is when there's shortages, then prices surge, and when there's excess, prices come down. And of course, so the price is fundamental part of how you add capacity. So of course it's going to take care of the pricing. It will eventually take care of the issue, and we'll see some sort of mean reversal as we do in most other cases. But it can take some time.
Well, most of the steel that is moved around the world doesn't move in containers. It moves in bulk, and everyone is talking about supply chain logistics failure in containers, but it doesn't really affect that much the steel industry.
Actually, Michael, right now we're experiencing serious problems at the ports, even on bulk material coming. Our key thing is the vessels come, we have no space to discharge, especially for cargoes, like let's say that is weather sensitive. We have no place to put it. So we're delaying things, and it's causing a lot of problems for us and the shipping companies, for which they are increasing the prices too.
One of the issues is for bulk shipping is the uncertainty of the freight rate and the uncertainty of finding a vessel when the material is ready for shipment.
Exactly.
And you also have the uncertainty on being able to discharge the material, especially into weather-sensitive areas. We have a buildup of steel in USA ports that are coming in under the Brazilian absolute quota and the Korean quota and Argentina's quota. And then we have the same thing in Europe waiting for the next quarter. And all of these things are politically initiated, and therefore we couldn't forecast them in the steel industry or in the shipping industry. So the shipping industry is charging what they can and what they can get away with. So there are a lot of happy people in Greece and so forth. So most forecasts say that the logistical expenses and the uncertainty will be around for another 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
So we better get used to it. The jury is out on that one. I mean, it's court. We're guilty. We're going to have to pay more in freight.
Yeah.
I think it's here for stay. Okay, thank you very much. Next one is for raw material suppliers, and it's about the European Union. The European Union should soon adopt a regulation that will require scrap sellers to sell material only to buyers who adopt the same environmental standards as European buyers. To what extent could this measure affect Turkish producers?
Yeah, I mean, the general plan from the EU is that you should have you should know sort of a know your client operations, so they should be sort of registered in the correct fashion and not notified, but at least set up correctly. I don't think it's going to affect Turkish producers negatively. It's a very important route for European ferrous scrap. And so in general, it's a bureaucratic operation to make sure that the buyers or the receivers are registered correctly. But in general, I don't think it's going to have an effect on the producers.
Okay, good to hear that. Thank you very much. Next one is for producers. Michael, what are your expectations for steel production in China in the coming period? The country has been seeking to keep its production this year within 2020 levels, while recently there have been expectations that production restrictions will be eased. What would be the main implications of such an easing of production restrictions for the global long steel market? Can that be?
It's difficult to answer that question because it depends on the demand in China. I mean, it looks like the demand is slowing down a bit in China. Before they were talking about 6.5% growth. Now they're talking about 4.9% growth. Mm-hmm. If you look at the inventory levels in the top 10 cities in China, the inventory levels were going up. The Chinese regulators were very concerned about the increasing prices for residential buildings because cement was more expensive, reinforcing steel was more expensive, section steel was more expensive. So I think there's a political push in China to reduce the demand. So obviously, if people decide to build 3 buildings instead of 4, that cuts the demand by 25%. So it can be a dramatic influence when you look at China making 450 million tons of rebars per year. If every 4th building is canceled, that's a lot of missing steel. Peter Marcus, in his latest forecast, says that the Chinese steel production in China will be down 3% this year compared to a normal year. Whether he's right or not, that we'll find out in February or March. Chinese production is estimated to go down or forecasted to go down in 2022 by a further 3% or something like that. I don't remember exactly the right number, but these are events that will be seismic. It's like before in the United States, they said that when General Motors sneezes, America catches pneumonia. Well, when China gets the snivels, the rest of the world has to pay attention.
I would agree with that. But it takes a lot to have less output in China this year, because as far as I remember, they were like 50 million tons above last year's production already by the first 7 or 8 months. So it's going to take a lot of reduction.
But the cost of production is going up in China, I'm told, according to the various surveys. So the margins are decreasing. And if the margins are decreasing, maybe a lot of mill operators decide to produce less steel if they're not certain to sell it. And maybe there's a change that's going on that we don't understand, that the Chinese domestic traders are not able to finance their purchases from the mills at the same extent that they were 1 or 2 or 3 years ago. If credit is being reduced because people or companies like Evergrande or Fantasia can't pay back their debts, then maybe the banks will say, well, why should I be financing 100,000 tons of rebars that are supposed to go to Evergrande?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you have already mentioned the problem with Evergrande. This next question is actually about that, and this one is for the traders. With Chinese property giant Evergrande on the brink of collapse, do you think Beijing can contain this crisis? Or what could be the impacts on China's real estate and construction industries and on the steel markets in China, and also the knock-on impacts on the wider global long steel industry?
Well, actually, this is a very good question, as Evergrande is the most indebted property developer in the world, which has really a $300 billion leverage and would likely default on its missed bond payments this month, maybe 23rd, I think. Yeah. In fact, Evergrande is not alone. Modern Land, a Beijing-based property developer, asked investors on Monday to allow it to delay payments by $250 million for next 3 months. Last week, another developer, Fantasia Holding Group, failed to pay back $206 million bond, citing pandemic and other problems. In total, bond defaults on Chinese real estate companies more than doubled this year. Today, it is actually, according to the CRIC, it was $7.2 billion this year, whereas last year was $2.8 billion. Now, this real estate crisis brings back the memories of Lehman Brothers' collapse in 2008, which sparked the global financial crisis. But economists so far have played down the comparison, saying that while Beijing may be, let Evergrande and their certain other companies fail as a warning to the others, but they will not allow a widespread economic failure. They have the experience and the money to dealing with these cases. Like the insurance group Anbang case, which was $320 billion liabilities in 2008, they resolved it. They most likely will distribute the assets of Evergrande as well to buyers and government and get over this. But regardless, this will be a big blow to Chinese construction sector, no doubt. Luckily, they claim, due to environmental reasons, China is reducing steel production. Maybe it's because of this one as well. Otherwise, the world steel prices will definitely suffer at the Chinese production level today.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on this one? No, I guess. Okay, let's move to the next question. Obviously, China's economy is slowing down. There is crisis in the construction industry, the Evergrande and Fantasia issues. As mentioned, production is going down. Under these circumstances, there is one very important question for the entire steel industry, and this one goes to the producers. Do you think China will return to the export markets again, as it did back in 2013-14, amid the slowing down of its domestic consumption? What's your expectation, Michael?
The domestic mills individually, they may or may not decide that they have to maintain volumes in order to maintain profitability and work to export things. I don't believe that Beijing will take lightly to such activity if it becomes en masse. So if for example, exports are maintained, go from 14 million tons to 17 million tons or 20 million tons, I think it will be tolerated. But if we were to return to the maximum level that we had a few years ago of 65 million tons, Beijing will take action a long time before that, because it conflicts with the policy of reducing pollution. The more steel melted, the more pollution. And the pollution is if you have 2.6 tons of CO2 produced for 1 metric ton of steel in a blast furnace, a modern blast furnace, 2 of them come from the blast furnace. So that means that as soon as you make liquid steel and pour it through a caster, whether it's slabs or billets, create the pollution. And so anything that's going to be exported that sounds like
according to one of our vendors in China and one of the biggest steel mill, they're saying that the Chinese government is considering to put export tax on steel, starting from January 1st. I don't know if that will happen.
Yeah, that is in the rumor mill, and in between January 1st and the end of the Chinese New Year, that may come, because it's against the policy of Beijing to increase pollution.
Blue skies policy, right?
Yeah, they don't want to export the pollution and keep the pollution at home, and then the dollars end up with the steel mill.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move to the next question. This one is for the raw material suppliers. There have been occasional rumors regarding the banning of scrap exports from various sources, for example, from Russia, Ukraine, the EEC countries, and the EU, though no official ban has been announced yet. Also, blast furnaces have increased their scrap usage due to carbon emission measures. In light of these developments, what would you say about the risks and opportunities in terms of scrap supply for the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, we've recently seen added export duties for ferrous scrap, for example, from Russia, which are in place and also affect the markets. So it's, of course, a way to try to withhold material for the domestic consumption. But these kinds of duties and bans or sort of hinders for trade seldom work well, and we don't see bans from the sort of world community, and we don't expect to see that either, because it's such an important trade for the areas where trade is active, and we expect the risks of that happening to be fairly mild. I mean, you would have to have full control, like in Russia or maybe Ukraine, but I don't think the EEC or the EU countries can take such a drastic stance with such vast exports.
Thank you very much. So moving to the last round, this one is for the traders. How do you view the current situation as regards the option of billet versus scrap for electric arc furnaces? And how would you compare electric arc furnaces and BOFs in terms of production costs? How do you foresee this picture developing?
Okay. Well, as far as the production, both have advantages and disadvantages. It's clear that the capital investment in blast furnace is much higher. However, after amortizing the capital investment, cost of production in blast furnace is generally lower. But with today's high coking coal and iron ore prices, blast furnace can also have disadvantaged as well. There's also a new factor, environmental and carbon footprint. Blast furnaces have much higher carbon footprint than the electric arc furnace, so the new trend is, especially in China, is to invest in electric arc furnace or converting their production to electric arc furnace. This will be a game changer in the next 6 months and beyond. On the other hand, due to electricity and scrap prices, the electric arc furnace has higher cost as well. But they have the advantage of stopping when they need to, or certain hours during the day of high electricity costs, like Mittal is doing in Europe today. Mm-hmm. As for the next 6 months, if the price of scrap does not go lower, blast furnace may continue to have its advantage, I think.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Go ahead.
Right now, for well-located blast furnace mills, they have substantially lower production costs to produce 1 more ton of steel than the EFA mills. Some of them probably are touching at the same price that an electric arc furnace mill is paying for its average metallic cost, a mixture of DRI, pig iron, prime scrap, and obsolete scrap. So something is going to change down the road as to how to address this inequitable difference on costs. And a lot of people think that China is the lowest price producer, but obviously Russia is the lowest price producer of steel coming from blast furnace. And even there is numbers circulating now that the average hot rolled coil price in China by a modern flat product producer is $669 per metric ton, and the average production cost outside of China is $615. And that's a spread of $54, $55 to the disadvantage of the Chinese. And if you look at the Chinese export price, for example, to export, you have to put it on a ship, and maybe that freight is going to cost $50. Whereas in India, you can produce it cheaper and afford to pay $50 in freight. They compete every day with the Chinese producers. So there are a lot of movements going on here, and it's. I started my discussion by saying it's a great time to be in the steel industry, and I'll end it by saying that it's going to be an amazing future. And there are so many things that are changing in the steel business, and it's going to be a very exciting time. So great and exciting.
Interesting times we are living in, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So let's move to the financing issue. This one is primarily for the raw material suppliers, but I'd like to ask traders and maybe to the producers as well. So Jens, question is primarily for you, as I said. What's the current situation in the financing of trading of scrap and or other raw materials?
Yeah, I think Don has a lot of points on this question, but when it comes to trade finance, sort of with letters of credit and so forth, then there's no shortage of financing. But on the other hand, when it comes to giving credit to the sort of when selling material to a European market or domestic market, then there's issues, of course, when it comes to insurance, credit insurance. The ability to cover credit with insurance has been fairly difficult during the pandemic period, and so far in the post-pandemic period. There is some trend or tendency now to see, we are seeing some signs that it might get a little bit better as the buyers of the raw materials, the steel mills, the foundries, and so forth, are performing better and actually delivering a very strong quarterly and annual results, which sort of alleviate the situation somewhat for insurance. But in general, we've seen that it's been a slow rebound so far.
Thank you.
I don't know if Don wants to add to that.
Well,
I believe so. Please go ahead.
Let me say this: for these scrap sellers, the life is not as difficult because most of the steel mills are doing great. This is their best times.
Yeah.
Financing became a major issue for traders. With price double from before, both traders and their clients are under pressure to finance. To double the pain, credit insurance for the buyers does not cover the exposure today. In addition, some of the buyers did not have a good year in 2020 due to the pandemic, which is affecting their credit line this year. We at Seba had to double our credit lines to meet the demand, but I'm not sure if all traders can do the same in these difficult times.
Yeah, this is of course one of the major points in the insurance, is that the commodity price, the raw material prices have shot up, which is so the cover is for less material if the insurance is to remains the same.
Exactly.
But what's happened over my career is that in the beginning, the steel mills financed the customers, and then the customers financed the steel mills. And then the traders became super traders who finance both the customers and the steel producer. And now we're in a cycle where the steel producer is actually financing the customers because the customer's credit insurance has reached the maximum level. And both customers and producers have to meet and say, okay, I used to buy twice as many tons at half the price. You guys have to help me out. And the steel mills have been extending extra credit or extending terms and so forth. And this is a trend that I think is a natural cycle in a business relationship.
But the mills are not helping the traders. We are the ones who are at big risk right now.
They're helping.
We are on our own.
I didn't say that. The traders are always on their own.
That's true.
That's why I got tired of being alone as a trader. I wanted to be in a group of people. And that's great.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. So moving on to the last question that I have here, and this one is for traders. Are the current rebar price levels in the global market here to stay? Or will prices adjust downwards somewhat without reaching pre-pandemic levels? Considering increasing scrap prices and electricity costs, is it reasonable to say that finished steel prices will not decrease in the coming period?
Well,
this might be a panel discussion as well.
Okay, why not? The short answer is yes, the prices will not decrease anytime soon, not at least until the second quarter of 2022. Recently, the scrap prices decreased a little last month, but the shipping prices continued to double, triple the original rates, so kept the prices the same. Consequently, steel prices remain the same level, throughout. Also, high energy costs will continue to negatively affect the prices in the near future. Finally, if China continues to decrease their production and stay away from the export markets, the high steel prices may still go for a long while. However, I think in the long run, neither the shipping prices nor the raw material prices will stay as high.
In the long run?
In the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Always equalizes.
Any other comments on this one?
It's an interesting development going forward, because normally in the Western world, there are very few rebars made from virgin iron ore. And this is something that may change, because today there is a dramatic advantage to iron ore-based production. And if you look at in Asia, you have Indonesia, you have India, partly 50% maybe, and China, 80% is made from iron ore. And if there's if there's advantages, people will be very quick to put in a billet caster and produce billets out of iron ore to feed the requirements of rebar, re-rolling mills primarily.
But it's still, Michael, it still is a huge capital investment, and it's a longer process. You cannot just build a blast furnace overnight. So not in 6 months, not in 2 years.
They will use existing blast furnaces.
Okay.
Just change the cast.
The old ones, revitalize, like we did in States. Yeah. We keep bringing back the old ones, and for a while, and then take out of commission again, and bring back again, and take out of commission again. I don't know how productive they are myself. I don't know.
Depends on how much money they are making, probably.
Or eventually losing before they close.
But I mean, there is a huge spread in between hot rolled coil and rebars. And the natural thinking is that hot rolled coil prices are too high, and the rebar prices are just right if you're in the business. So obviously, the cost of not having rebars if you have a residential power project is very high, because rebars is a very small component of the total cost of the building. So rebar pricing is quite inflexible. It is not determining on whether a building is being built or not. So,
but Michael, I'm sorry.
If the general infrastructure spending is strong in Europe and the United States, that will give tremendous support to long products. Much more support to long products than flat products. If
you look at back like last 2 months, when prices were easing off a little bit, there was a bigger gap in the hot rolled coil price versus the long products. Long products prices did not go as much high, therefore they came down a little, whereas hot rolled coil prices did go extremely high and came down a little bit more than the other one. But in the long run, I mean, you just go back 2 years or a year and a half, the hot rolled coil price was below rebar prices, which never made sense either. So I think these things will just go back and forth. And but the reality is, hot rolled coil historically should be higher than the rebar prices, because of the capital investment in it and the cost of production.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. We have really appreciated your answers and the discussion. Now we will proceed with the Q&A session with the attendees. May I request all three of you to stay a little bit more with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to remind you that you may send your questions directly to the panelists. We have already received a lot of questions, but if you have more, in order to send those questions, please do click on Who is Attending section at the bottom right-hand side of your screens while you are in the virtual conference room. Then click on the exhibitors, and the conference room option will appear. You may click on the conference room to type in, and then send your questions to us, to the panelists. Once again, you may type in your questions here and then send them to us. So, gentlemen, let me start with the questions we have already received. There's one question, I think it is about the Turkish flat-rolled market. So I'm skipping that one. My apologies for our colleague who sent it. Let me go on with a question from one of our close friends, a seasoned trader, Phil Edmonds. Phil asked the following question. Alex Gordienko, obviously, showed the Spanish electricity price increases. Have the Turkish increases been as extreme, or has the government held them down? They have, actually. The spread between scrap and rebar is now between $220 and $230 per metric ton. What do the panel consider the cost spread between scrap and rebar range from best mill to worst mill? No need to mention names. The rebar prices have moved up sharply in the last week based on supply side pressures. One can see that mills such as Selsa and Megasa might achieve these increases. But what about Turkey? Apart from a few small markets like Yemen and Israel, what chance do they have to achieve these prices given today's freight rates? Europe as a sales market is not an option. Definitely not. As a follow-up to the last question, this one, if rebar sales are not possible at current prices, will suppliers rather turn off their furnaces given the cost pressures, and will this lead to a fall in the surging scrap prices? A very long question. I hope you have been able to follow that. If you like me to repeat, I will certainly do that. Any others? Well, we have already discussed a lot on the market, but from a trader's point of view, or from the panel, anything to add? Any other comments?
It's really a producer's question.
It seems like the prices are reflecting the market, aren't they? It seems there must be someone buying at these prices, otherwise the prices wouldn't be at those levels, I would think.
Certainly. But obviously, as Phil mentioned, there are some difficulties. There are certain differences between the markets right now. There's a certain imbalance, arbitrage opportunities, etc. So I think he's referring to those imbalances. That's what I was. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, Turkey should have a strong market potential towards Asia, shouldn't they?
Probably. Yes.
One comment I'll have is I don't think the Turkish government is subsidizing the energy to the mills.
No.
I mean, so I don't think there is such thing. I think the Turkey is in the same boat like the others. You know, the difference is in certain countries the energy cost is higher. I can give you an example. In the US, the natural gas prices are like $5, okay? And in Europe is around $20. So yeah, Europe is disadvantaged because of the cost of the gas. I mean, they have converted their coal-fired plants to gas and hoping that they'll get more gas. And Russia decided not to give them as much. So their prices went up dramatically. So yes, there's a difference from one region to the other, but it has nothing to do with one government subsidizing or not. It's just in the US, nobody's subsidizing, but the gas is cheaper.
Certainly. I mean, shouldn't be referring to any subsidy or something like that.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's move on to the next question. This is from David Hendrickson. I think this is for raw material suppliers. I think this is for Jens.
I wrote a reply on it in the chat.
You have already. Sorry. So I'll skip this one. Iron ore futures prices were cut in half in August, September. Is it meaningless because of coking coal shortages? Any comments on this one?
Yeah, we talked about it before that coking coal is, of course, a very an important part of the equation. So to make up the full cost of 1 ton of steel. But yeah, so it's a part of the equation, of course. And that's also why we see pig iron now imported to China in quite substantial volumes as a result.
Thank you very much. Next question is from US, Mark Hennings. Mark's question is as follows. In the US, the vaccine mandates are going to impact construction as most of the trades are unvaccinated and have the support of union leadership. What do you believe is the impact on steel markets short term and long term? Tom, any comments?
I don't think we can say that the majority of the workers are not vaccinated. I mean, keep in mind, we have close to 60% of vaccination in the country. So, that goes from one group to the other. And lately, there's a lot of news in the media of certain groups, the police, whatever, trying not to get vaccinations. But overall, the country is fine. I don't think we'll have a problem going forward. And vaccinations will continue, even the third ones.
As in the state of Texas, you have to present an alternative opinion to everything. And not to mention any numbers, but there are substantial portions of the population that have a much lower vaccination rate. And I think what Mark Hennings, and I say hello to Mark, that there is a proposal in Washington, D.C. that any industrial activity or manufacturing activity that has more, company has more than 100 employees, that there will be a government mandate that everyone has to be vaccinated. And there's been tremendous pushback by parts of unions or all of unions, and there's been tremendous pushback from workers who say that it's their choice to be vaccinated or not. But sometimes Beijing and sometimes Washington, D.C., they make decisions that are maybe not well supported, but there has been a loss of production in both steel and in placement of rebars in the United States because workers have been at home in quarantine. And today it's not so simple to get and educate a new placer for rebars or bend rebars, because maybe 20% of your workforce is at home in quarantine because one person had COVID. So I think it's something that is, it's a small elephant in the room. It may not be a big elephant, but I think it's something that the industry should look very severely on.
Having said that, Michael, the death rates and the hospitalization rates are coming down in the US, not going up. I mean, it's a free country. We can't force everybody, although the government decided to do so. But really, overall, I don't think that it's going to be a major issue. It wasn't before. It won't happen again either.
Personally, I'll take
the pandemic in the highest years, we kept producing.
So it's well, I think it's a never-ending debate for many countries in the world right now. So yeah, let's move to the next question. This one is from Mr. Baysal, but I think Ünal Baysal. With higher energy prices, should we anticipate more mill maintenance? Will mills be pausing production? Become normal over the next 6 months?
I guess this is for Europe, not for US, because our prices are high, but not that high. So I don't think that you will have that. But in Europe, it's going on. So it's a European problem. Maybe Jens can answer this.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
No, I mean, should we anticipate more mill maintenance because of high energy prices? We are
already seeing outages as an effect of electricity price peaks. So I mean, we will see that here during the fall in Europe, that mills idle during pricing peaks.
Yeah, some maintenances will probably be brought forward and so on.
Most
any comments,
probably.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So next question is from another frequent attendee of IREPAS meetings, Mr. Khalid Al-Dukhail. He asked, China announced they will consider iron ore as a strategic commodity. Later, we saw iron ore price plummet. I'm getting the belief that China will make sure prices of finished products are going to be low in the coming years. Don't you think so?
It's one viewpoint. It may be right. It may be wrong.
That would be a long debate, I presume.
I mean, China may have already reached the peak steel. I'm not sure, but they will, of course, also during the next, if you look a little bit further, medium term, 10 years time, shift a lot of their production towards electric arc furnace based production, at least for the most part of long product production, as they will have ferrous scrap available in the domestic market. And they then don't need to import 62% iron content and release CO2. So my view is that we will see this shift continue at a quick pace over the next few years, when as the availability of the domestic raw materials continue to surge.
There I can have a nice debate, maybe in another venue, but the situation is that there's a lot of investment going on in the Chinese steel industry about increasing scrap input into the converters or even into the blast furnaces, going from 12 to 15% to 25%. And if that kind of development occurs in the next 2 or 3 years, which is a relatively short cycle, the scrap consumption, the scrap accumulated in China will all end up in the integrated route and bypass electric arc furnaces. And right now in China, they have brownouts and shut off electricity. And maybe some people are sitting in some offices planning to invest $200 million in electric arc furnace under candlelight. This may not be the most opportune time to make such an investment when those tools are still there.
Yeah, but that's transitory, I think.
Well, as I said, it's a debate.
Yeah.
Okay.
As inflation is transitory nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
So now there's transport inflation, huh?
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So one more question. This is actually, this one has been sent by my colleague Eunice Ouyang, who is our SteelOrbis editor in our Shanghai office. Market Resources said China is considering returning to the import market for rebar and wire rods. Do you think this trend will continue for a long term or a limited short term?
It must be short term. They don't need to import. You know, they're the largest producers in the world. They have capacity. So why should they continue? These are all temporary decisions, and I'm 100% sure that it's not going to be, futuristic.
It's opportunistic at best.
Exactly.
I would certainly agree with that. Thank you very much. And one more question. This one is from Süleyman Ayata from Turkey. Although we didn't hear any rebar export from Turkey, the Turkish producers are increasing domestic rebar prices. Is it a balloon? What do you think? Well, this is probably for a question for the Turkish producers, but well, we don't have any at the panel right now.
Well, you have a 20% inflation rate in Turkey, and a dollar costs 930 lira. So it's not very strange that also domestic pricing surges. To my mind, at least.
No.
I've been following the Turkish mills. They're actually going up and down with the market. If the market goes up worldwide, they go up with their pricing. And their domestic industry was slow because of the construction was slow, but now it's picking up again. So I think they're not doing anything, different than what they should do, given the financial situation in Turkey.
Thank you very much. So, gentlemen, once again, thank you very much. This concludes today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, I also would like to thank you very much for your questions. I would like to thank you all for participating in this session. Once again, my sincere thanks to the chairman of the IREPAS committees, Mr. Jens Björkman, Mr. Doğan Baysal, and Mr. Michael Setterdahl. Really appreciated your presence and all your help in sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon in person.
We hope to see you soon in person, right? Yeah.
Yes, definitely in person. Next one will hopefully we will be holding a physical event in spring. Well, it's obviously up to the board of IREPAS to take the decision. We are just hoping. We're just hoping. Once again, thank you very much. Really appreciated your presence, your expertise, and your opinions, your time. Hope to see you soon in person. Last but not the least, I would also like to express our appreciation to our sponsors, İçtaş, Alex Stewart International, Belgian Scrap Terminal, and Intechno for their support. As I mentioned at the beginning, ladies and gentlemen, the online networking tools will remain available for you for October 19th, Tuesday, and the 20th, Wednesday as well. Please take good care of yourself and hope to meet you face-to-face in person in 6 months' time. Take care and stay safe. Have a good day.